Hello and welcome back to the Fantasy Playmakers. What's up, guys? For today's video, I'm going to be doing another player versus player comparison, and today I'm going to be talking about some high-level quarterbacks. So the two guys that I'm going to be comparing in this video, it's going to be Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. So I'm going to be going through each player's current ADP, talking about their 2019 season, their 2020 season, what I expect from them in 2021, and then which player I'm going to be drafting in fantasy drafts. And remember, I will be giving my opinion, but that's not the end all be all. The purpose of these videos is just to present all the information so you guys can make the best, most informed decisions when you are on the clock in your drafts. Before I get into my breakdown, I just want to say that if you guys watch this video and you're enjoying it, please just make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps me out more than you guys know. And then also let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. Are you going to be drafting Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen this year for fantasy? Let me know your reasoning and I'll respond back to you as soon as I can. But let's get started. So first, I'm going to talk about each player's current ADP. So right now, Josh Allen is being picked as the QB2 behind Patrick Mahomes, and then Lamar Jackson is right behind him going as the QB3, and they're both kind of going in that early 5th to mid 5th round ADP. So they're being drafted very close together. Looking at each player's 2019 season, Josh Allen finished as the QB10 in points per game. He averaged 18 points per game. And then Lamar Jackson finished as the QB1, averaging 27.7 fantasy points per game. Let's start off talking about Josh Allen's season. So this was his sophomore year. Coming off of his rookie year, he played in 16 games, threw for 3,089 passing yards, 20 passing touchdowns, 9 interceptions, but rushed for 510 yards and 9 rushing touchdowns. And he really was able to stay fantasy relevant because of that rushing ability. That passing ability alone wasn't getting it done, but he was number 2 in carries, number 2 in red zone carries, number 3 in rush yards, and number 1 in rushing touchdowns. All of that is among other quarterbacks. He did show some solid improvement in the passing game from his rookie season, but he was still a bottom tier passer. He had a 58.8% completion percentage, and then I'm just going to run through all the different kind of completion percentage metrics and talk about where he ranked, because it was not pretty. He was 33rd in true completion percentage, 24th in play action completion percentage, 46th in red zone completion percentage, 33rd in deep ball completion percentage, 34th in pressured completion percentage, and 34th in clean pocket completion percentage. So basically in the bottom half of every efficiency metric in terms of completion percentage. And so I think Josh Allen was more so viewed as a quarterback who could have some fantasy value, but just probably wasn't going to be one of those top tier NFL quarterbacks. Then let's move on to Lamar Jackson's 2019 season, and this was really his huge breakout. He was also a sophomore. Him and Josh Allen were in that same draft class. He passed for 3,127 passing yards, 36 passing touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 1,206 rushing yards, 7 rushing touchdowns, and this was one of the best fantasy football quarterback seasons of all time. He averaged 6.6 points per game more than the number 2 quarterback, so just provided an unreal positional advantage, and he led all quarterbacks in carries, red zone carries, rushing yards, and passing touchdowns, so getting it done through the air and on the ground. Now on to the 2020 season, we saw Josh Allen finish as the quarterback 3 in points per game, and Lamar Jackson finished as the quarterback 8. So starting off with Josh Allen's 2020 season, the Bills traded for Stephon Diggs in the offseason, which really gave Josh Allen a true wide receiver 1. He had some solid weapons there with John Brown, Cole Beasley, but Stephon Diggs was really coming in to be the guy in that Buffalo Bills offense, and he played 16 games, passed for 4,544 yards, threw for 37 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and then ran for 421 yards and 8 rushing touchdowns. He also improved his completion percentage in every single category that I mentioned earlier. So, all the categories he was in the bottom half of quarterbacks. He improved and he was at least above average or average. And with that improvement in the passing game, he was also able to maintain those rushing numbers that really allowed him to be fantasy relevant early on in his career. Now on to Lamar Jackson's 2020 season. He really fell off from his 2019 MVP season. He threw for 2,757 yards, 26 passing touchdowns, 9 interceptions. He rushed for 1,005 yards and then also rushed for 7 touchdowns. But he regressed in nearly every important statistical category. Really, the only place you didn't see regression was in those rushing touchdowns. He had 7 in 2019 and 7 in 2020. And everywhere else, he definitely declined. But he did finish the 2020 season on a tear. He missed a game for COVID. And then after he came back, the last 5 games of the season, he averaged 27.1 points per game. So that was kind of a flashback to his 2019 season. And I think that's giving a lot of people hope for Lamar Jackson's 2021 outlook. That's a perfect segue for me to talk about both of these quarterbacks' 2021 expectations. To start it off with Josh Allen, I honestly think he's going to put up similar numbers to what he did in his 2020 season. I just don't really know if there's much room for improvement with Allen's stats. He finished towards the top of basically every statistical category, so I think that's pretty close to his ceiling, and it may kind of seem like a shot towards Josh Allen, but it's really not, because if any quarterback can put up those numbers consistently year after year, they are locked in as a top 3 probably fantasy quarterback. For Lamar Jackson, I see him returning to his 2019 form with a little more emphasis on the passing game. The Ravens went out and invested in the wide receiver position this offseason. They signed Sammy Watkins in free agency, and more importantly, they drafted Rashad Bateman in the first round of the NFL draft. And they're not going to draft a first-round receiver if they are not trying to use them consistently. So I think that's really a telltale sign that they want to pass the ball more this year, and Rashad Bateman will have the opportunity to break out and really help Lamar. Jackson is basically a lock for at least 1,000 rushing yards every season, and so he really only needs to show some slight improvement in the passing game for him to regain his place as a top-tier fantasy quarterback. Now it's time for me to talk about which player I prefer in fantasy drafts. So if I am on the clock and Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson are both on the board, who am I going to be picking? And for this, I normally have a pretty clear option of what player I would want. But honestly, at this slot, I can't really argue against either player. I think Josh Allen is likely the safer option just because you saw him play at an MVP caliber level just last year in the 2020 season. Lamar Jackson obviously had a rougher season after being drafted as basically the consensus quarterback 1. But then Lamar Jackson definitely has the higher ceiling. His rushing upside is unmatched to any other player. I talked about this with his 2019 season, but he had over a 6-point per game cushion over the next best quarterback. So I think it's really up to you. Who are you looking for at this ADP? Do you want the safe quarterback that almost seems like a lock to finish as a top 5 quarterback? Or do you want the guy who has a good chance to finish as the QB1 but may just have a little bit less security? Alright guys, that is going to wrap it up for this video. Thank you guys so much for stopping by, watching, and listening. Like I mentioned earlier, if you enjoyed the content, please just make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And then let me know down below in the comments, who do you prefer this year for fantasy? Is it Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson? I want to hear your guys' opinions, and I'll respond as soon as I can. Thank you again, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.